I'm working on the Abstract Symbolic Self Portrait. I've already gone through the process of using the grid system to draw the outline for my self portrait. Now it's time to start adding some symbols, as well as be inspired by Chuck Close in his work as I figure out new and creative ways to use marks and shapes and lines to do my shading. Previously, we took some time to answer some brainstorming questions for the purpose of coming up with ideas that we could then turn into symbols. As you can see right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm adding some images into my portrait that have come from that list, the answers to those questions. The way that you put these symbols in the picture is really up to you. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong way. There are some different possibilities that you could think about, though, that can maybe help you get started. And one of them is to find shapes in your portrait that you can turn into another picture. So I've kind of done that with my mustache and my eyebrow and the iris of my eye. I've used those shapes and inserted into them my symbols. And so those symbols are kind of taking on the shape of those facial features. So that's going to help it look like both a facial feature and the symbol that it's supposed to be. Other times, I might just put symbols in what you might think of as random places. They're not really random. I did choose them, but they're not like taking up the shape of a feature. They might just be in a square somewhere in the middle of my face. And the plan is that I will still just use shading with different techniques in order to kind of work that in to the portrait. It's called abstract for a reason. Take my little robot there, for example. It's just taking up a square, but it's not using any of the facial features for that robot. It kind of looks a little bit like a face tattoo, but we can make that work. It'll still look like a face, and it'll also have other things going on in the picture as well. Okay, so I'm going to start using color now. And before I start using color, I tend to erase the pencil lines so that my colored pencils don't mix with the pencil lines. I don't really want to see those. Sometimes when I color, I'm going to color like normal, or what I think of as normal. I'll just try to shade and try to make it smooth, that kind of thing. But then the other part of this project is trying to figure out different marks and shapes and techniques that you can use to do the shading. That's part of what's going to make it abstract. So now you can see that in this square with the eyelid, I have chosen to do two different techniques. So one square is one technique, and the other square is a different technique. And now I'm working on the third square, and it's like a zigzaggy pattern that I'm using to shade that area. So far, I've chosen to use two different colors, purple and light blue, and those are kind of acting as my dark color and my light color, so that I can use the purple for the darker areas and the blue for some of the lighter areas. And this is where I need to try and use my imagination. I need to try to figure out different ways to use lines and different shapes to create the same look of shading. It's not going to be the same look, but it's still going to do the shading. You're going to get an effect of dark to light. That's what we want to see. We want to see the different ways that we can achieve this dark to light shading. And if you can go square by square, it shouldn't be too overwhelming because you're just looking at the shading that exists in that square only. And then you're trying to figure out a way to represent that with shapes and lines. However, it's totally your choice how you're going to arrange this different shading that you do, all these variety of techniques of shading. I chose in most places to go square by square, but you don't have to do it that way. You can mix and match your types of shading in any way that you prefer. You can do the same type of shading that just spreads through an area and then just change that type of shading whenever you want to. You can have one feature be one type of shading and then a different feature be its own type of shading. You can go square by square like I have in most of my spots. And you can do any of the above. You can mix and match all of those. Notice also that I repeat the same or similar techniques in different squares too. So not every single spot has to be entirely different from all of the other ones. You can repeat them and kind of move them around to different spots in the artwork. When you're looking at this whole eye area, it might feel like it's pretty darn overwhelming. Like it looks too complex for a lot of people. Looks like it doesn't make a lot of sense how it works together. But remember, if you do go square by square, then it simplifies it for you. You just have to think about what the shading is in that particular square. And then once you're done with that one square, you move on to a different square. And then you move on to a different square. And by doing that, you break it down into pieces. And before long, the pieces will hopefully come together to show us what we want to see, the features of the face and the shading, the darks and the lights. You can approach this in different ways too. You can just go a feature at a time. So you can go like an area at a time. You're looking at the shading in only that area, and you're doing something to create that shading. And then after you're done with that area, you go on to a different area. So if you just kind of break it down into spots, places, then it becomes a little bit less overwhelming, hopefully. However, I really do want to challenge you to come up with as many different ways to shade as you can. That means using a lot of different lines and shapes to create textures and patterns. To help you get started with this, refer to the different shading techniques that we practiced before. Okay, I'm going to finish this artwork in the next video where I give you more brilliant insights into how you can tackle your artwork. Have fun and good luck.